Okay, please enjoy your pizza, and if you need more, just feel free to get up and walk back. I'd like to introduce you to Jason Aldridge. Actually, Jason was one of the first people I met when I started here about 3.5 years ago. Jason's the executive director of the Career Management Center at J. Mac Robinson College of Business. So Jason actually works with Shari, or maybe more appropriately, Shari works for Jason.
It depends on the day.
Yeah. Jason's also a student, currently a doctoral student at the University of Georgia, pursuing his PhD, his EDD. His research topic is facilitating the career adaptability of graduate business students. Better you than me. He's also presented in several regional and national professorial association conferences throughout his career. Joined Robinson in 2005 and developed the Career Management Center as a full-service career services office. So, Jason Aldridge.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate it. How's everybody doing? It's always good to be either before lunch or during lunch, but after lunch, you're all going to fall asleep. So, I'll try to keep this engaging and entertaining. We're talking about career pathing, which for many of you might seem like something, well, right now you're focused on finding that first full-time job and you're not too worried about the next 5 or 10 years. But at some point, I think it's really critical to have some idea of what is sort of over the horizon. I've got a lot of material that I can share with you today. And so what I'm going to do before we kind of dive in is just give you a couple of frameworks to keep in mind. So how many of you have heard maybe your parents or older siblings talk about climbing the ladder, climbing the corporate ladder? A couple of people. How many of you think that really is the way it works today? There's still a corporate ladder, and you get on the first rung and you just sort of climb steadily. How many people think that's really how it goes? One person, couple people. How many people disagree? Okay, one brave soul. Okay, let's talk about that. What if you disagree, or if you're not sure? What do you think it might look like if it's not a ladder? If it's not a I do this job, this job, this job, and I just sort of slowly climb. What do you think it might look like, and why? More important. Yes.
Well, I disagree because for it to be a ladder, it has to be straightforward. But what it seems right now is you can you don't always have to shoot straight up.
Right.
So you have to start at some level, gain some experience here, so gain some skill here, move across. So to me, it looks more like a pyramid.
More like a pyramid?
Yes.
That's interesting. I like that. I don't know if everybody can see this, but I'm just going to put this up as we identify some of these frameworks that I think are important. I'm just going to try to draw some pictures and give us something to think about. Okay. So he hit a couple really important points. Is it a ladder? Do you go in as a actuarial assistant, and then you're an associate, and then you're an analyst, and you sort of just steadily climb the rungs with one organization, or is it more of a pyramid? Okay, where you might sort of move like this, over, maybe you're making progress, maybe even go lateral, you might even take a step back. How many people think it looks more like that today? Okay, all right. And tell me what you're basing that on. What have you seen, what have you heard, what makes you think it's more like this pyramid model? I know you're eating, but we're going to talk. So, when you get a chance, go ahead and speak up. Anybody? Yes.
So, with the ladder, people go in and, when it's time for someone to be promoted, the one who's been at the job longest will get promoted. Yes.
Right, based on things like tenure. Hey, I've been here for 10 years, it's my turn.
Yeah. But these days, it's not really like that.
Okay.
You might have the same qualifications, but maybe the next person will promote it over you because maybe the person has better communication skills, better personal skills. So it's not really a hard and fast rule these days. It's different. Other things contribute to you climbing the ladder. So.
Okay, so I'll just summarize what she said. I'll put it in my own words. I think what she's saying is it's more about performance, not tenure. Right? Does that make sense? I mean, how many people have you met that you think, well, that's great, you've been in the job 20 years, but you don't really look excited about it, and I'm not so sure you're doing a great job, right? Let me tell you, I agree with, is it Yolanda? I agree with Yolanda. I think in most organizations today, they're valuing, while experience is important, at the end of the day, it's all about performance. But she hit on something, a couple things in there that are really key that sort of lie underneath performance. So let me pose this to the group. What do you think it is that drives performance? If you had to, there's a term. What is that? What do you have to drive performance? Yes.
Ambition.
Ambition, sure, that's part of it.
Motivation.
Motivation, sure.
Determination.
Determination, sure. And what are all those things?
Personal skills.
Skills, personal skills. What was the word?
I said skills.
Skills, I'm sorry, I thought, okay. There's another word that starts with C that I'm looking for.
Communication.
What's that?
Communication.
Communication? Yeah, that's part of it.
Commitment.
Commitment? No. Competence?
Confidence.
Confidence? We're getting closer.
Compensation.
Compensation, that's important, but that's not the word. We like to get paid, yes.
Character.
What's that?
Character.
Character, yeah. Those are all, everything you said are sort of skills or qualities. I'm looking for a word that's more kind of overarching. Anybody?
Connections.
Connections. Important. I like it, but not what I was looking for. Okay. I'm not going to sort of belabor that point. Here's the term, competencies. You heard that before? Maybe I thought somebody had said it. Okay, very good. So let me hand out. You just take one and sort of pass it down. Let me hand these out. There should be some extras. What you have here is a list of competencies sought by employers. And we're going to talk a little bit about this once everybody has one. But let me just elaborate a little bit on this pyramid versus ladder based on my experience and some of the research I've done. A couple of key things to remember. The ladder idea was very much a reality probably until, depending on the industry, 70s, 80s. You know, how many of you have grandparents or even parents or uncles who were with one company for 30 or more years? Okay. Now, how many of you have seen a brother, sister, cousin that's maybe 10 years older than you stay with one company for more than 10 years? Very few. Okay? What's going on there? What's changed from, and this is not, don't quote me on this, but this is just sort of a ballpark. So let's say from post-World War II, right, 40s, to the 80s, right, it was pretty common. People spent their whole career with one organization. 30, 40 years was the norm, right? Didn't matter if you were a laborer, you were working in construction, you were at the executive level, a lot of people stayed in one place. So what's happening here with this, and I kind of like this pyramid idea. What's happening here? What's going on? What changed? Anybody? Okay.
I think the dynamics is no longer the same. There is more of it's more of a global market now. Like people move from places to.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so there's a global level of competition that's happening. That's definitely a factor. What else is going on?
New technologies.
New technology, absolutely. You can work from home and Skype in, and you can do things from anywhere, right? So what does that give people? Mobility, right? Wouldn't you say that, I think we would all agree that going from this model to this model, we have massive mobility now. I mean, you can pick up and move, you can use technology, right? Companies can pick up and move, enter new markets. Any other big factors that are driving this? There's a couple. Yeah.
Career shift.
Say that again?
Career shift.
Career shift. So people are just sort of sometimes choose to make a move and now they can. Is that what you're getting at?
Like people like they switch careers, like in 5 years, 2 years with the job market. Someone become finance, they become MD.
Okay. So let's just say you have more career changers. All right. Now I'll pose a question. I don't know the answer, but I think there's sort of two parts to that. There are definitely executives and really highly skilled people who you are all becoming part of that have the ability to job hop, right? Because you have skills. There are also people, though, who don't have, maybe are not as highly skilled or educated, who companies pick up and move, and they are forced to change, right? You see that with, name an industry where you've seen that in the U.S. There's 2 or 3 big ones.
Prudential.
I'm sorry? Prudential? Okay, that's a company, but think about industries. So auto, think about automotive, right? How many people do we know, or you've read an article, oh man, they're closing the plant. You know, I made $40,000, $50,000 a year, didn't have more than a high school education. How am I going to find another job like that, right? What's another one like that besides auto industry? Another big one. I'm sorry?
Manufacturing.
Manufacturing in general, sure. Isn't there a lot of talk about offshoring? Right? Man, those jobs are gone. So I point this out to say, career change, it's a double-edged sword, right? There are people who have the ability to move, and there's people who sometimes get stuck in that, get caught in that. That's important for you to remember, because as highly skilled and knowledgeable as you are right now, 20 years from now, if you don't stay cutting edge, guess what? Even as a knowledge worker, right? Not a factory worker, not a laborer, even as somebody who uses your brain, guess what you have to do? You got to reinvest in yourself and stay sharp and stay current. One of the things one of the reasons I'm back in school after doing this for almost 20 years is when we hit the downturn there in '08, I realized a lot of things, but one of the key ones was, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to work another 20 years, right? I mean, this is a marathon out here. Okay? You all are sprinting to that first job, but once you get into your career, it's a marathon. Okay, you got to stay current, stay fresh. All right, so these are all important. I think there's a couple other things that maybe you haven't thought about. I'll just put it out there. Education, yeah. Education's, I think, part of this career change, maybe. Okay, but access to education, affordable education kind of facilitates this. Let me throw out another one. Downsizing. I mean, what happened from here to here? I mean, companies, and it's still going on, but if you think back or you did some reading on this, I mean, companies took out layers of people. You know, 50,000 gone, 70,000, 60,000, right? So that what happened was, if an you all know what an org chart looks like, right? You got the CEO. Okay, I'm just making this up. This is a typical org chart today. You got entry-level staff, middle managers, senior leaders, a CEO. That's today. All right. Literally, there were whole bands of people, 2 and 3 layers sometimes, that just got eliminated with the downsizings. So you think about corporate mergers, corporate acquisition. You know, one of the ways they make those work is they say, hey, we're going to take Time Warner and we're going to take Turner Broadcasting, we're going to merge them, and then we're going to start cutting layers of people out to save money. Okay? All right, that a lot of that happened between 1980 and now. During this phase, you had companies basically building all these layers. So that's one of the reasons you had all this stability out there. Okay. Hope I'm not boring you with the history lesson, but I think it's important to have some context as you go out into the workforce and understand what you're entering. Okay. So what you're entering today is a very flexible, rapidly, organizations who have become very good at rapid adaptation. Right, so we're going to take 2 companies, we're going to merge them, we're going to take out layers of people, and guess what? Really, really good people get let go. Have nothing to do with your performance. So you could be performing, you could even have tenure. Somebody 2 levels above you decides to do a merger, you're out. Whose fault is that? Nobody's really, right? Just sort of the way it is now. So I say all this to say, listen, stay focused on your immediate short-term goal, which is first full-time job in this profession, right? But as you enter the workplace, understand that they're lean and mean, okay? They really value performance, and what I would call the pace of change is just accelerating. So guess what the average tenure of a chief marketing officer is today? I was just talking to some people in marketing last week. How many years do you think the chief marketing officer sticks around? 3 to 4? I thought 3 to 4. It's about 24 months. 18 to 24 months. Why do you think that is? What's marketing's responsibility? Revenue. Bring it in. So guess what? If you can't bring it in, you're out. So that leads to a lot of turnover, a lot of movement, a lot of change. Okay? So that's when I say, you've got this really dynamic organization, this dynamic, fluid world out there that you're entering. Let me share one other analogy with you, and then we'll move into sort of present day. I think the career ladder today looks more like a rock climbing wall. Okay, I like pyramid, but I've kind of come down on rock climbing wall. Has anybody ever done rock climbing or seen it? Most of us have seen it, right? And guess what? You don't go straight up. You go to the side, you go up a little, you may have to go back to the side, kind of like this picture. You might find yourself stuck and have to do what? Go back down and go, now where am I? Okay? I'll tell you a little story. There's a senior vice president, somebody that sits right here, one level below the C-suite. Guy works over at Georgia Power. And we had him come talk to a group very much like this a couple years ago, and he showed his career path. Now this is a guy that even though he was in one company for 30 years, that looks pretty traditional, right? You peel back the onion a little bit and you find out, well, how did you get to this senior VP level? He did exactly what we're talking about. It was like a rock climbing wall. He had a nice chart, and it said, well, I started off as a lineman, checking electric lines, and I moved up to manager, and then I had to go sideways, and then I had to take a step back, and then I jumped ahead 2 levels, and then I went sideways again, and then I moved up. So my point is, even if you're fortunate enough to get into a fairly large company that's somewhat stable, and you do rise, it's not going to look like this. So for example, we have an alum who's the CEO of SunTrust Bank, okay, right down the street, and we just did an article on him in the Georgia Robinson magazine, and he talks about this. He says, a lot of people say they've had 6, 7, 10 different careers. He said, I can relate to that. I just did it all with the same company. All right. My point is, I don't care if you're going to be with one company or 10. Your career most likely is going to be a rock climbing wall. All right. So when you get out there, let's bring it right back to where we are now. You're thinking about that first job, and that's wonderful. Get the first job. Get a year or 2 of just experience under your belt. But while you're in that first year or 2, what I want you to be thinking about is what's the next move on the rock? Okay? And where do you want to go? Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Most of us are not going to the C-suite. It's okay if you think you want to go there. It's okay if you work like heck to get there. But most of us are not. Okay? So just start here in the first couple of years and say, all right, what's the ultimate goal? What am I trying to achieve in life? Do I want a family? Do I not? How much money do I really need to make? Okay, because I guarantee you get 5 or 10 years into your career, whether you get married or not, whether you have a partner or not, whether you have children or not, whether you set real strict geographic limitations on yourself or not, will significantly impact what's possible. Okay, and I'll tell you a little story. We have a lot of graduate students here who will come to me and say, yeah, I really want to move up, I really want to make a lot more money, I want to go to the C-suite, da-da-da-da. Great, where are you willing to relocate to? Well, I'd like to stay on the east side of 400 up in Alpharetta. Okay, if you're not familiar with Atlanta, that's north of the city in about a 20 square mile area. How does that mindset relate to what we just agreed is going on in the world? Pretty limited, right? So let's say somebody wants to be, what would be the most senior role somebody in actuarial science could achieve? Would it be chief actuary? So how many chief actuary jobs do you think are on the east side of 400 in Alpharetta? I mean, maybe one or two, maybe, right? So my point is, you've got to really do a reality check at some point in the first probably 5 years of your career and start to figure out, what are my values, who am I, what am I doing, what are my limitations, if any, okay, and how far do I want to take this thing? That right there will set sort of the structure around how you climb the rock wall and what you do. All right? And I don't say that to limit you or to scare anybody, but having done this with people at the 25 to 40 year mark in the last, I've spent a lot of time with that population in the last 4 or 5 years. Trust me, these are the things that really start to put some limits on what you can do. Okay? So some of you might say, well, you know, I'm just going to delay all that. I'll wait until I'm 35 or 40 to think about kids or marriage and things like that. That's a great idea if your goals are to go really high, right? Go out and get as much experience as you can. Okay, one of the strategies I hear from people that are very successful is they actually say, you know, I delayed all that so I could go where the opportunity was, so that then I had a lot more influence later over where I lived and the kind of work that I did. And I think that's a great strategy. Some of you may already be approaching that age range. You may already have limitations you've got to work with. That's one of the first things we talk about with folks. Okay, let me get back to this concept of competencies. All right, you have the competencies in front of you. Some competencies in front of you. Now, isn't it interesting? How many of these competencies have you developed in courses directly related to becoming an actuary? How many? Just flag. Just count out of that first group, the top 15. How many of those would you say, man, I really developed that through my coursework significantly? Maybe not totally, but significantly.
Maybe 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Okay, name a couple.
Intelligence.
Yep.
Self-knowledge. Initiative. Goal achievement. Direction.
Okay. So let's say 4 or 5, right? Does anybody disagree with a lot more, a lot less? 4 or 5 everybody's comfortable with? Yes.
Just in addition to what he said, ability to handle conflict and
Ability to handle conflict?
yeah.
Okay. Here's my point. Isn't it interesting that we're saying here are competencies employers want, and you've just spent a lot of time, money, blood, sweat, and tears earning a degree in in your cases, in a very specific, almost technical area. About a third, maybe a half, of these competencies have any sort of correlation to what you've been studying. What do you think of that? You want a refund? I'm kidding. You need the kind of skills and basic knowledge that you've been gaining through your academic career to this point. You've got to have it, right? But my point is, it's a starting place. It's a foundation. It's a baseline of skill and knowledge that you just have to be in the game, right? So congratulations, you're in the game. What does this tell you? Got some other things to develop, right? Got some other things. And you notice at the bottom, we use the term leadership or soft skills. Have you ever heard soft skills before? I used to work with a lot of engineers at Vanderbilt, and engineers are an interesting group. You know, very technical, very detail-oriented. But some of the senior faculty used to say to me, you know, Jason, at some point, every engineer realizes that the hard skills are easy, and the soft skills are hard. What do you think they mean by that? Yeah.
I think it means that, you know, for hard skills, like developing technical skills, that'll just come for them after a while. But
right.
The soft skills, that's something that's not as concrete, and it's something that just takes time to develop.
Right.
You gotta be patient.
Like if I walked in, pronounce your first name?
Damar.
So if I walked into Damar's office, he's been on board for 3 years. Damar, you're now in charge of a small team of actuaries and a couple of interns this summer. I'd like you to go down to Georgia State and recruit them. And you got to go next week. Good luck. What do you think's going to happen? Oh my God, I've never interviewed anybody. How do I book a hotel room? I don't know how to juggle all the projects I currently have, right? That's like the first thing that happens. And then you actually get down to Georgia State and you're sitting across the table from some of the kinds of folks we have in here today, and you go, my boss sent me down here to interview you. Right? And very quickly, the soft skills get, for most people, pretty hard and pretty uncomfortable. Well, why is that? Why is that? Haven't done it, right? You just haven't done it. Most of the stuff that you need to rise in an organization over the longer term, you just haven't done. You need time to practice it. And the other tough part is there's not too many courses or places to learn this stuff. You sort of learn on the fly. Okay, so there's a couple of key things in here I want to point out. Number one, the thing that drives performance, long-term performance, is probably not those hard skills. All right? Most people get fired. Why do you think most people get fired? You think it's for hard skills? No. Why? Can't get along with people. Can't develop the soft skills. Right? So, my point is, if you're going to perform over the long term, after you prove to the organization that you have these hard skills, these technical skills, particularly in your field, then people start to go, well, he can do it, DeMar can do anything I want him to do with a spreadsheet and a bunch of numbers. That's great. But now I want to see if he can manage people and projects, if he can get in front, if I can put him in front of customers, if I can send him on the road to represent the organization. Woo, now we're getting into the soft stuff. Okay? Remember the term I used earlier, competencies, right? So a competency is something that really, over the long term, drives your performance. Now, this is really key. When we talk about competencies, I don't know if you can see this, but I want you to think about competencies through the following lens. There's three categories of staff, basically. Individual contributors, managers, and executives. All right? Individual contributor is typically that first level or two of staff members. They don't supervise anybody. They have a list of duties and responsibilities. Their job is to come in and do those and do them well, right? Manager typically oversees a group of individual contributors, probably also has to interact externally or with senior management. Senior management or executives may have several managers underneath them and have much broader responsibility to drive bigger initiatives, strategic initiatives, responsible for revenue, things like that. Does that make sense? Everybody sort of gets that? Okay? Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Under each of these, there's a lot of research done by a company called Lominger. Lominger did a lot of academic research on, well, what are the competencies that you need to be successful here, here, and here? And what they found was really fascinating. Guess what? Do you think they're the same? Yes? Okay. Anybody disagree? You think you need the same competencies to be outstanding at every level? Okay. I hear some disagreement. Why?
Well, because at different levels you need different levels of competency, because some of the levels are more advanced than the lower ones.
I would just change that a little bit to say different kinds or different. So it's not just the level of competency, but it's the type of competency. So let's look at your handout for a second. So if you're an individual contributor, do you need to be able to wait? If you're an individual contributor, do you really need to be able to handle conflict?
Yes.
No.
Do you need to be able to handle conflict as well as a manager? Okay, so how about an executive? You think conflict gets harder the higher up you go, or easier? Harder. Yeah. Much harder. It's more nebulous. Comes out of left field. You don't have a lot of warning. Okay. So my point is, let's just take that one competency, ability to handle conflict. Guess what? At the individual contributor level, it's barely important. Particularly if you are truly, like in your world, you might be somebody who is in an office, we give you a bunch of data, you do your thing, you hand it back to the boss, that's it. The only conflict you might have to negotiate is with the boss. You don't have to interact with a lot of other people. But now I put you in charge of a team. Guess what? It goes from barely being on the chart to top 5. So tomorrow, Rochelle?
Yes.
Rochelle is going to be the manager of this entire group. Good luck, Rochelle. Go get him. Okay? I guarantee you in the first week, she's going to have to deal with conflict.
Yeah.
First week, it's going to happen. Hey, Rochelle, I've been waiting for that promotion, and I want this guy's office, and, I really, I'm going out on maternity leave, and, whoa, hold on a second, right? It's going to happen. I've been there. Now, what's interesting is there's things at that individual contributor level that go from being top 5 to being almost 0, right? There's also things that all of a sudden like this appear and are in the top 5, and the research shows that if you don't know how to deal with it and quickly, they call them flame-out factors. So very, very quickly, if you can't, and I know ability to handle conflict is one of the top ones for a manager, and if you can't handle that, you will flame out. It's also called derailing, which basically means, Emanuela was with us for 5 years, we promoted her, and in 6 months she was fired. Well, what happened? Okay? Well, what happened? Well, guess what? And there's actually a whole book under the following title. What gets you here, okay, won't get you here. Okay? So you get here and you think, I'm the manager. I made it. I got the $20,000 bump, I got the corner office, right? Uh-oh, there's a whole new set of things that I gotta learn, and I gotta learn it fast, and that's called learning agility. Okay, so people with high levels of learning agility, who can learn on the fly and quickly, tend to do very well as they move across these levels. When you get slowed down and you're not advancing, chances are, not always, but chances are, you haven't realized that there's 4 or 5 critical new competencies that you have to master in a hurry. And if you don't, guess what? You'll either stall or you get derailed. Could be in the same role for a long time, could be pushed out of the organization. Okay? Executive level, same dynamic happens. All of a sudden, you're feeling good, I'm a manager, I want to be the regional vice president. They promote you because you've done such a good job here. You get in here, lather, rinse, repeat. Here we go again. Man, I got 5 or 6 new things. So, why do you think I'm sharing? Why do you think all this is important? What are some things, well, let me just start with that. Why do you think this is important to know? Yeah.
Have an idea of the big picture, as in can't just focus on the here and now. You have to
absolutely
start saying,
want you to be prepared.
So 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Yep, want you to be prepared. That's step 1. Okay, let's take it a step further. What could you be doing in these jobs to be prepared? How could you be proactive? Yeah.
Like at the lower levels, exercise, even though you may not, it's not as important, you can still exercise the skills.
Stand up and say that very, very loudly. This is the aha moment I hope everybody doesn't forget today. Rachel, stand up and preach it strong.
I said even at the lower levels, you should still exercise all the skills that you would need to execute at the higher levels.
See, simple, right? Hard to do. So here's the message. When I have you buried under spreadsheets, okay, don't get too good at the spreadsheets.
Okay.
Be good. Do a good job. Don't turn anything late. Talk to your boss. But while you're talking to your boss, say, hey, I'm getting pretty good at this, I think, and I appreciate the feedback, and really that 3% raise was just awesome last year, okay? But I'd love to have your job someday. You know, someday, don't want your job, but when you move up, I'd like you. Okay? All right? And so, I'd like you to be my mentor. Okay? This is where networking and finding mentors becomes critical. Okay, Damar, well, let's talk about that. What do you think, you know, how can I help you? That's great, you're ambitious. Well, you know, I've done some research. Some crazy guy 5 years ago told me that I need to be thinking about this. And what I want, I see you going to a lot of meetings, I see you going on business trips, and I don't get to do a whole lot of that. I was wondering if I could shadow you, or could you help me understand what it takes to be a successful manager? Now, you could use the word competencies, but I'm making it a little more palatable, okay? So my whole point here is, if you want to move up, don't just focus on the 5 or 6 things that you got to be great at. Focus on the 5 or 6 things that you're not doing now that you better be ready to hit the ground running and be good at. Okay? So I'll give you an example. When I was about 5 years into my career, got a promotion, started supervising people. But you know what? I had already been asked, before I got the promotion, I'd already been asked to go and represent the organization at some conferences. They had asked me to go and be part of an interview team, trying to hire people. And you know, in hindsight, I didn't even know what they were doing. I didn't even realize it. But they sort of thought, well, this guy's probably going to move up. Let's get him ready. Okay? Well, that was great. I had some really wonderful supervisors and managers. But you know what? Everybody doesn't get that. And so you may have to ask for it. You may have to find it. So you've got to be thinking about, what are the competencies that I really need for that next role, and start working on them while you're in the current role. And know that even when you're ready, okay, and this happened to me on this job. Man, I was ready. I had done this for 10 years, 2 different schools. I'd had a ton of success, and everybody was telling me I was ready, and I got in here, and the first 18 months went really great, 24 months went great. Bam! We hit the downturn, 2008. Everything I thought I knew, out the window. I mean, I was drowning. I mean, we had staff conflict, we had students upset, we didn't have any jobs. Now what do you do? Okay? So even when you think you're ready, when you get in the role, there's still a learning curve. My point is, get yourself prepared and get a network of people who are rooting for you, so that even when you get in there and you don't know what to do, you have resources and people you can turn to. Okay? And the biggest thing is, never think you know it all. Ever. Don't ever assume you know it all. There's this soft skills area, it's like infinite learning. Just when you think you got it figured out, somebody will knock on your door and go, I'll give you an example of one that happened to us a couple years ago. Somebody knocked on my door and said, we got a problem with a student. Oh, really? What's going on? They have hacked into a fellow student's email account to try to find out who's getting job offers from different companies. Sat back in my chair and I said, that's new. Done this for 20 years. Seen a lot of people do a lot of silly stuff. Never heard of that one. Okay? I guarantee you that a couple years, had this happened a few years before this, I probably would have said, I want to know who that student is, and I want them in my office, and I want to talk to them right now. Well, I had learned through dealing with conflict and problems that sometimes, you gotta ask other people for some advice. So I talked to my boss. We got some more information from somebody else, and you know what I realized very quickly? We were dealing with what I thought could be considered a case of identity theft. So instead of even confronting the student, I just called Georgia State Police. And I said, here's what's going on, here's what we've heard, what do y'all think we should do? They said, we got it. They took over, okay? Bottom line, student didn't end up graduating, student didn't end up getting the job they wanted, they're out of school, okay? All right, my point is, there's nothing in life that prepares you for those kinds of knocks on the door, okay? Except doing it for a while, okay? And getting better and better at handling it and not being knee-jerk and too quick to move. That's a competency that's really tough to develop here when you come right out of school, all right? But you gotta be thinking about that, even here. How am I gonna deal with that? And pay attention to how others deal with those things and who does it well and who doesn't and why. All right, so here's my point. Don't get too good at spreadsheets and not pay attention to what you need at the next level. Does that make sense? If you don't remember anything else, remember that, okay? You need to develop different competencies and sort of flex some new muscles even before you get the promotion. And be networking and talking internally. The other thing I'll tell you that I've benefited from, and I see this with a lot of folks, probably many of you will go to work for some fairly large organizations. Make sure you find a way to build a network outside of your little unit or your company. So if you're involved with like this organization, the International Association, right, stay involved with that group, okay, or find some other professional networking groups that you can connect with. So you get to know actuaries or people in your business at other companies, because guess what? When that merger happens, because it's going to happen, right? And you get taken out for no good reason, what are you going to do? You better have a network. There's a great book by a guy named Harvey McKay called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And the whole idea, he talks all about these dynamics, and his message is basically, look, this stuff's going to happen, probably through no fault of your own. Be ready. Have a network. Be able to call people. Now, I was probably 30, 40, 50 people I could call that afternoon. Doesn't mean I have a job waiting for me, but it significantly increases my chances of finding a job in the next 6 months to a year. Right? Folks, one other thing, if you don't forget, please do not be the kind of folks, and I deal with them every day, that you are doing a great job for your big company, and your boss loves you. And you're so busy doing that job that when you get bounced, you have absolutely no clue what to do next. None. Don't be that person. Okay? And the thing I'm trying to shift here is just throughout your career, be proactive. Be thinking about your next move or two or three. Don't be reactive. All right? And reactive happens to all of us. You get comfortable, you got a couple raises, life is good, bang. That's when this stuff tends to happen. All right, let me just pause there. That's a lot of stuff. Questions on any of this? Does this make sense? And I want your feedback. Is this helpful? Because a lot of this is kind of new material that I've developed over the last year or two going through this doctoral program. So, and if you don't have to raise your hand and tell me it's useless right now, but I will send an email. I will send an email. I sent one just before class with some materials for you to read. I'd love you to email me back and tell me what you liked and what you didn't like and how I could improve it, because I'm getting ready to kind of roll this out for a lot of groups over the next couple of years. But does this, just generally, does this help? Is this new? Or is it sort of like, yeah, I know that, Jason? Pretty helpful. I mean, even if you sort of had some level of understanding, is it helpful to have some models? You know, I mean, maybe all this isn't radically new, but is it helpful to say, you know, to have some pictures and some, okay, yeah, this is how it works. Okay. All right, let me take you through, do we need a little restroom break? Because I've got until like 2 o'clock. Do you want to take like a 5-minute restroom break, or is everybody okay? Okay, if you need to take a break, go ahead, step out. There's pizza. Anisha's selling pizza. Why don't we just take, you know what, let's come back at 5 after 1, and I'll do part 2 of the presentation, okay? Give you a 10-minute break. Okay.